of the Gene Keys Golden Path Love, a guide to your Venus sequence. All right, and we are starting with gentleness. This is one of the bigger books in the Golden Path series. I really love this book. It's one of my favorites, and it has been really helpful and transformational in my life. So I hope that this finds you at that same place and gives you that same amount of help and comfort. Gentleness, the secret of sexual healing. When moving into contemplation of your sexuality at such a deep level, the most important quality to remember at all times is gentleness. Many issues coupled with our sexuality occurred when we were young and lacking in experience and wisdom. As we move further along the Golden Path, we will be journeying into the cycles of our childhood in depth. But for now, the essential ingredient to add into the mix is tenderness. There are knots woven into our DNA that will only yield to the very softest touch. You will therefore have to be the tenderest parent to yourself as you step into this terrain. No one else has the capacity to heal these places inside at the level that you do. Indeed, just remembering this self-gentleness over and over again may well be enough to bring healing to your heart and body. The shadow. When contemplating the shadow of the gene key relating to your attractor field, it is an opportunity for you to look into the subtle layers of your desire. You can consider this at a sexual level and a material level. How has the shadow played out in your life? How is it playing out today? Consider the disturbance that the shadow may have caused you and others. There is no need for blame or guilt here. We all carry a fractal aspect of the great sacred wound. Our path through life is about coming to terms with this imperfect part of our nature. Our sexuality makes us feel so vulnerable, but equally we can also hide behind it. Everything in the world is rooted in sex because everything penetrates everything else at a quantum level. At one level, sex takes place whenever two auras interact, regardless of sexuality or age. This is the merging of the creative electromagnetic field of every relationship. Look deeply, therefore, into this shadow, and be willing to feel the vulnerability of your theme and how it is trying to find wholeness in the outer world. The gift. The gift emerges as your awareness cuts through the projections of your sexuality and finds the place of innocent vulnerability that is inside every one of us. In vulnerability lies great strength. This does not mean that you have to go around expressing your vulnerability, rather that you own it as a private interior wisdom that belongs to you alone. If you decide to express it, then it needs the right environment and person to receive it. Your vulnerability connects you more closely to everyone else's vulnerability, no matter how hardened they are on the surface, and this makes you a naturally more compassionate person. It is an amazing revelation to begin seeing the people in the world around you as innocent children, all with this same wound at the heart of their being. This kind of shift in your attitude relays a very different chemical signal through your attractor field, and you will undoubtedly find that the whole outer landscape of your life will also change to reflect this transformation. The city. The city of your sexuality involves a profound spiritual transformation. Beneath the Gene Keys revelation lies a body of teachings known as the Corpus Christi. This encapsulates the higher teachings of spiritual initiation and describes the nature of the subtle bodies. Within this corpus of teachings and transmissions, we learn about the specific process that occurs as a person's frequency becomes more and more refined. At a certain stage, known as the fifth initiation, the sexual energy at the core of our being is transformed in a tantric phenomenon known mystically as the Annunciation. This is directly linked to the transformation of our lower astral nature into its higher counterpart known as the Buddhic body. The city of your sexuality governs this extraordinary alchemical process. Alchemical. Well, I'm trying to speak correctly. It is at this stage that your attractor field begins to operate at its highest level, drawing in the most refined and exquisite frequencies from your greater self. This leads to a phase of prolonged transmutation, which is often also accompanied by states of ecstasy. The 6 lines of your sexuality, the sphere of attraction. Attraction line keynotes. Line 6, disappointment/innocence, resigned/ecstatic. Line 5, entrapment/sensuality, manipulative/masterful. Line 4, frigidity/romance, distant/intimate. Line 3, promiscuity/playfulness, melodramatic/adventurous. Line 2, lust/passion, inadequate/liberated. Line 1, sterility/fertility, empty/wholesome. Line 1, sterility/fertility to empty/wholesome. Each of the following lines has a general theme and an accompanying state. Depending on the frequency of your inner attitude, you can see how both play out in your life at a low frequency and a high frequency. The first line of the hexagram always conveys the essence of the whole topic, and here we can see it is about sterility or fertility. Our Dharma offers us so many opportunities to be creative with our lives. There is always a fertile response to every situation. On the other hand, the shadow consciousness is depletive rather than abundant. Sterility can be applied to any human sphere. You can be spiritually sterile, financially sterile, socially sterile, emotionally sterile, and of course, sexually sterile. Sterility leads naturally to disease because it involves the blocking of the natural life force through the body. This leads to experiences that are perceived as devoid of meaning, and which therefore drain us and leave us feeling empty rather than full. States of depression or exhaustion follow naturally out of the shadow of this first line. Our modern world offers a cornucopia of distractions for our desires, from excessive materialism to overstimulation of our body and senses. Many of these leave us feeling empty and sterile, closing down our attractor field and locking us into tight, unimaginative little lives. Relationships lived with the low frequency of this line will soon seem sterile and dull, lacking the luster of hope and joy that they might once have had. The higher frequency of this first line is anything but sterile. It is a rippling field of pure unbridled potential. If you have a first line sexuality, then you are a hub of creative forces. You will attract relationships that are dynamic. They may not always be easy, but they will have a potent and fertile aura, out of which much beauty can arise. The difference between a sterile and a fertile relationship is always your attitude. Every relationship has the potential to be a wonderful adventure. If the luster has faded, then it is down to your own perception. You will have to open up your heart again to life rather than blaming the relationship. This reawakening can occur in any relationship. Fertility is about seeing life at a higher frequency. It is about seeing the whole of a person rather than only the shadow or even the gift. This is when a relationship becomes wholesome, when it includes the shadow, and the shadow is embraced and transformed. Only then can the higher purpose of the relationship be realized, and only then can the attractor field draw in the elements that support you in living your life at a higher frequency. Line 2, lust/passion to inadequate/liberated. The roots of human desire run deep. There are many forms and frequencies of desire. Our most basic desire is the desire that drives us to mate. This is a genetic pressure inside us that rises and falls according to our distinct hormonal cycles. However, this evolutionary impulse to procreate also gets entangled with other forms of desire. For example, the desire to escape our suffering. Our unconscious desire to escape suffering is the foundation of the shadow frequency, and it drives us into endless cycles of pain and pleasure. Many of our relationships come as a result of us following our sexual desires, which is perfectly natural. However, when this becomes mixed in with our desire to escape suffering, perhaps in the form of an unrealistic romantic projection, our relationships can very quickly become difficult and disappointing. The second line of the hexagram is in many ways the most expressive of its essence. At the shadow frequency, this means that the second line will always express as lust, which is the bleeding of sexual desire and fear. Lust on its own has a kind of animal purity, but when coupled with deep unconscious fear, it becomes unstable, and a person in its thrall becomes blind to their own feelings and the feelings of others. This is sex used as a weapon against fear or as a distraction from fear and deep discomfort. The deepest fear that drives the shadow states is the fear of our own death, the fear of non-existence. For example, when the Hindus describe the endless cycles of rebirth that we humans move through, they are describing our desperation to escape this primal fear. The fear exists inside us at a cellular level, so we can never escape it through any external strategy. The second line must therefore come to know the deeper force that drives its sexuality, the hunger to escape one's own discomfort. At its source, this is felt as a potent sense of inadequacy. Even though such people can be very comfortable within their sexuality, their real fear is of the depth of their own feelings or the fear of feeling nothing at all. Such fears are responsible by their feelings of inadequacy. If you therefore have a second line sexuality, you must get in touch with this sense of inadequacy. Otherwise, it will always prevent you from experiencing a truly fulfilling relationship. It is easy for the second line to hide behind their sexuality and continue a life where sex becomes nothing more than a temporary release of the pressure of this deep fear. As you contemplate your gene key and its line theme within this sphere of attraction, you may have to move into uncharted waters as you touch hidden places within your psyche, both within yourself and possibly with your partner. You will have to get in touch with your vulnerability, and this requires patience and a very soft touch. You will have to remember to tread slowly and go gently into this highly sensitive territory. When you do touch your own sense of inadequacy, know that you have hit upon the real treasure. There is no pressure to do anything other than wrap it in awareness. You may also have to break one of your deepest habits, the use of your sexuality as a means of escaping from your true feelings. However, when the ice begins to melt, then the same energy will reemerge. But instead of being filtered through fear, it will carry the vibration of love, and this will be expressed in your life as passion. The second line sexuality can experience a powerful liberation through their desire nature as their true passion emerges for the first time in an open-hearted way. An open-hearted second line leads to a life lived with great passion, and the passion will tend to move to higher and higher levels of frequency. Once fear is seen and accepted, our desire transforms from the urge to escape suffering into the yearning to feel and express deeper love. A truly healthy second line sexuality will burn with an intense wish to know one's own higher nature, which will at the same time be balanced by a pervasive gentle compassion for the nature of the human sexual wound. Line 3. Promiscuity/playfulness, egodramatic/adventurous. The third line sexuality can have two possible expressions at the shadow frequency. While one is expressive and promiscuous, the other may be repressive and locked. The third line is naturally warm and playful, but sometimes because of certain relationships that are drawn into one's attractor field, the third line may have a painful early sexual experience that has the effect of freezing one's sexuality. The healing of such a deep-seated wound may be beyond the scope of the Golden Path program, as it may involve help from an open-hearted therapist specializing in these kinds of traumas. In such cases, the first step in healing is to accept that one needs help and to begin the journey of finding that help. Like each of the 6 lines, the third line has its own particular path of healing. As was stated earlier, the combination of self-awareness and inner-tenderness towards oneself can bring hidden wounds to the surface, where they can be healed and transformed. The expressive shadow of the third line will tend towards promiscuity, which always leads to melodrama. The third line often creates a complex life for itself, with many broken relationships and disappointments. Unlike the second line of lust, the third line is in some ways more addicted to the drama of the chase than the actual sexual act itself. The third line shadow likes to titillate and run. It will display open-heartedness right up until the point of commitment, and then it will close off and run away. We need to remember that these patterns are unconscious inside us. They are the many ways in which we do our best to handle our desire nature. There can be no blame because we inherit such patterns from our culture and conditioning. The third line desperately wants to be in a committed, open-hearted relationship, but at the same time it keeps undermining itself. The trick is to become aware of the unconscious patterns that drive us. The moment we can see the pattern, we cease to be a victim of it. The third line sexuality needs to temper their life with a good sense of humor. This is not a disparaging kind of humor, but a tender-hearted ability to laugh at one's own dramas. When we can begin to look at our own lives as we might read a good Jane Austen novel, we begin to realize that we no longer need to be unwitting pawns of the dramas played out by our genes. Of all the lines, the third line needs this perspective the most. Once you can see that you have been trying to escape your own heart, you can see how futile and ridiculous a thing this is. At this point, you will become more playful. A healthy third line sexuality will indeed be experimental and adventurous, but not at the expense of your heart or the hearts of others. With awareness, you will be able to see your heart opening and closing all on its own, but you won't have to think that there is anything wrong with you. This means that you can stay in a relationship and still have the adventure of healing. You will only ever be able to heal your heart in a committed relationship that is accepting of vulnerability. No matter which line you have activated in your profile, you will need this ability to forgive yourself when your heart temporarily closes off. We each need to learn the gentle art of self-parenting. This involves the ability to caress your own heart back into life. Often this must be done alone, as we let go of the pain and blame and allow ourselves to feel safe once again. Whenever we blame another for our own hurt, we are making ourselves into a victim. Although our hurt may well be triggered by another person's insensitivity, our first goal is to be able to nurture our heart back into openness. Once we have mastered this art, which is art made possible at the gift frequency, we can move on to the final goal of keeping our heart open all the time, no matter what, which is the realm of the cities. Line 4. Frigidity/romance to distant/intimate. The fourth line really encapsulates the theme of self-parenting. In this sense, we can all learn a deep lesson from the fourth line process. The low-frequency keynote of the fourth line is frigidity, and its state is about being emotionally distant. So many relationships move in this direction. The juice and excitement dries up at a certain stage, and the two people drift apart. Frigidity can take place on many levels. The relationship can become monotonous and get bogged down in the many demands of everyday life and responsibility. The raising of children, for example, can put a great demand on any relationship, often driving a wedge between a couple who once felt deeply in love. There is nothing that creates more distance in a relationship than the untransformed shadow patterns of each partner. If there is no sense of higher purpose to the relationship, then the shadow patterns may well strangle the love at the heart. If there is no way of understanding the shadow and transforming its energy, then the icy world of resentment and conflict will inevitably set in. Nowhere is this more clearly seen than in the fourth line expression. The healthy fourth line is all warmth and friendliness, but in its shadow manifestation, it becomes distant and cold. The human heart feeds on intimacy, and true intimacy involves vulnerability. The fourth line shadow has a knack of switching off the warmth in a relationship, often without even realizing it. The fourth line shadow often manifests through tone. Couples experiencing deep conflict are usually exceptionally sensitive to the tone of each other's voice. A cold tone can have an instant triggering effect on another person's openness. The fourth line shadow therefore needs to become aware of the kind of tone they use by gauging the feedback from their partner. In the introduction to the Venus sequence, we learned how every relationship acts as a mirror, and this is always true. Your relationship to your partner shows you your relationship to your own heart. How you handle this mirror is the great topic of the Venus sequence. When you are able to accept personal responsibility for your own expression, whether conscious or unconscious. You have begun the great journey of transformation. When the fourth line realizes how frosty and distant it is being, and is able to let go of blaming the other for their state, then they have taken the first and most important step in self-parenting. Now they know that only they have the power to bring love back into their heart. The fourth line keynote is romance, because it needs to find gentle, creative ways to romance itself. Of course, the fourth line in pain will also respond well to another person coming to them gently and with warmth and understanding. As is so often the case with all manner of inner difficulties, the fourth line also needs to be approached with great patience and calm, in the spirit of open-heartedness. When they emerge from their hurt, they will exude gratefulness and warmth, as though their whole aura were an invitation to intimacy. The healthy fourth line sexuality will also very likely wish to express its love through words as well as through their physicality. As we have seen earlier in the activation sequence, this fourth line is all about the breath and communication. It is through the fourth line that the great words of love always come into the world. Line 5, entrapment/sensuality, manipulative/masterful. Like all the lines, the fifth energy may express itself in either a repressive passive manner and/or in a reactive aggressive manner. The grand theme of the fifth line sexuality is entrapment, and this can be seen on many levels. The more repressed version of this theme is about being a victim of your own low self-esteem. The fifth line shadow continually worries about what others think about it. Sexually, this can lead to many unhealthy patterns. Perhaps you become obsessed with pleasing others at the expense of your own feelings or needs. On the other hand, perhaps you allow your fears to entrap you in a belief that you can never satisfy your partner, which then becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you consider your individual line theme alongside its gene key, then the story will eventually become clear to you. All fifth line shadow themes are about being ensnared in a false mental projection field unconsciously created by your own fears. The reactive version of the fifth line shadow expresses itself through a more extrovert nature. It can use sex unconsciously to manipulate others, again through the creation of a false mental projection field. These are people who may seem more than comfortable with their sexuality and who can use it to entrap others in an unconscious game of power or politics. Beneath this pattern is a deep fear of true intimacy, and often a tender wound that may have occurred in one's youth. The fifth line weaves a web of self-delusion that can project great self-confidence, but that feels very insecure. Once a fifth line person begins to admit to their true vulnerability, feeling it inside the body, their whole belief system about who they are can be shattered. This is often a delicate process that requires patience and sensitive support. For the fifth line, the process of waking up can be fairly dramatic as one's entire worldview is built up over years around the grain of these false beliefs and projections. When we first see how delicate our inner world really is, it can be alarming. It can also be very empowering to let go of who we think we are and step fully into a present moment undefined by our past experience. The fifth line has an inherent gift for sensuality, which is why so much of its worldview is based around its relationship to sexuality. If you have a fifth line sexuality, above all, you will have to learn about having crystal clear boundaries. You will exude a powerful sensuality no matter what you do, so it is vital that you learn to accept, enjoy, and appreciate the beauty of this, rather than becoming a victim of it, either through an overcontraction or an overexpansion. The healthy fifth line is masterful in how they deal with their sexuality in the world. It becomes a part of their charm and grace without being in any way unnatural. Within their intimate relationships, the fifth line can experience the full power and beauty of their sexuality, and it can become a powerful healing and self-empowering force. In their outer life, sexuality becomes sensuality. It carries a natural appropriateness wherever it goes. It is vivacious without being misleading, playful without being seductive, and mysterious without being bewitching. It is the perfect expression of a healthy sexuality at play in the world. Line 6, disappointment/innocence, resigned/ecstatic. The sixth line can often feel like it carries the weight of all the other lines within its process. In the activation sequence, we saw that it is the line of vision, and to arrive at that vision, it must move through a lifetime of experiences that are varied enough to support such a far-reaching view. At the shadow frequency, the sixth line can therefore be very confusing. The vision beats deep within our DNA, but it doesn't seem to manifest externally. It often emerges only to collapse back again, leaving the sixth line disappointed at such a deep level that they can give up on life altogether. When you apply this process to our sexuality, one can quite easily imagine the kinds of things that might occur. The sixth line often has a foretaste of their highest potential when they are young. In relationships, they may fall deeply in love with someone only to see this fade or crash or burn up, leaving an emptiness behind. Of course, all romantic love is like this, and most human beings experience this at some level in their lives. Each of the six lines carries a universal theme that is applicable to us all. The difference with the sixth line is that at some level they cannot give up on the dream. Nothing the sixth line does can kill the dream inside. For this reason, the sixth line sexuality may have completely resigned itself to the belief that their dreams are unrealistic. Mentally and even emotionally, they may have given up hope of ever connecting with another person at the level they once dreamed of, even though at a purely physical level, their DNA still carries the promise of more. What all of this means is that every time the sixth line engages at a sexual level, somewhere inside they feel a kind of cosmic disappointment. The lessons they must learn, therefore, are patience and perspective. We have to accept and trust the stage we have reached in our process. The sixth line, moreover, has to straddle two worlds. They must accept what they have in the moment, but they will also wish for more. It is this wish for more that needs to be translated into a subtle impulse in their lives. It is not designed to be repressed. The impulse to grow, evolve, and learn lies at the heart of every healthy relationship. For the sixth line, this impulse must be trained inwardly into one's own process of heart expansion. One must tread carefully here, because the wish for more can be so easily aimed at one's partner, where it is readily turned into blame. We blame the other for not being open enough to love at the level we wish. In fact, it is usually us that are not open enough. If we were open enough, then we would also allow our partner to love at the level that they are currently capable of. Therefore, the safest and most natural place for the wish for more is to use it as a means to become the very model of open-heartedness that you have always dreamed of. It is intriguing that so many people dream of experiencing greater love in their relationships, but for the most part, they project this wish onto their partner as a wish that they might change. The secret of the sixth line is the secret of the whole Venus sequence process. We can use non-love to create more love. This is the heart of the Venus sequence, this gift of turning the challenges in our relationships into an inner teaching that widens our capacity to love. The moment you can use your discomfort for the purpose of inner transformation is the moment you transcend your disappointment. The final goal of the sixth line, and therefore all relationships, is to rediscover the heart of our own innocence. This means we must embrace every fear, every anger, every trace of guilt, blame, or any negative charge, and use it as a fierce inner lens to focus the power of our own self-love. You may see that the natural state of the healthy sixth line is to be ecstatic. To be ecstatic means to be as a child, to be surrounded by the halo of our own innocence, and to cavort in the field of unconditional love that is our true nature. And to be ecstatic means more than this. It also means that we are living the vision inside our hearts, instead of projecting it onto the world around us. We no longer blame those around us for our feelings of non-love, but use every grain of shadow as a means of sculpting more ecstasy from the living clay of our relationships. Contemplating the sphere of attraction in your relationships. When you have read each of the six lines of sexuality, you will have a good general view of how those lines work within all relationships. As has been said already in this book, if you find that a certain line has a strong resonance for you, but does not appear in your profile, you should trust your intuition above and beyond the profile. Life is filled with mysteries, and sometimes we do not see the whole picture until later on in our contemplation. The entire art of contemplation is to put aside any predefined ideas or notions you may have around a certain subject. Sexuality is one of the most charged subjects of all, so it's a good idea to surround it with a sense of spaciousness, both mentally and emotionally, as you dive into its mysteries. As you contemplate the sphere of your attraction, you might like to think about the power of your attractor field and how it keeps bringing certain relationships into your life. See if you can find the common thread that runs through each and every one of these relationships. What is your greatest lesson? What is your Dharma trying to show you, and at what level are you listening to it? Your sexuality exists in a pure form outside of your past and your future. Its nature is innocence. How can you regain that innocence? Much of our challenges with sexuality are rooted in our past, and in the worldview we have evolved because of that past. The great challenge is to look upon yourself with fresh eyes and to move deeper into your own vulnerability without demanding anyone else has to go there with you. Since you are no longer a child, you now have the opportunity to be a gentle and nurturing parent for yourself. Like any child, you need a combination of tenderness with firm boundaries. Above all, it may help you to enter into contemplation of your sexuality if you enter in playfully, without instantly tensing up. If you do tense up and feel constriction, then take a pause, breathe into the difficulty, withdraw safely if necessary, and then bring your heart back to life in your own time, without blame and with compassion. The more frequently you do this, the easier it will become. Be gentle with yourself and find your rhythm as you go about this powerful, life-changing work. And next time we will be on the pathway of karma. Now, I hope you found this as helpful as I have. I love the Gene Keys and I love human design. It's been such a great change in my life and it's been incredibly helpful for me. So if you want more information, this channel is going to have a lot of Gene Keys and human design type videos and live streams, as well as the normal videos that I typically do, which have to do with fitness and wellness and things like that. But I'm so excited about the Gene Keys and human design. Thank you so much for the like. I'm so excited about the Gene Keys and human design because it really is transformative. It really is so helpful, and it really is something that can benefit you immensely. So thank you again so much for watching and for being with me today. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and or join as it is popping off on the other tiers. I am so grateful to everyone for helping me grow this channel, and I look forward to seeing you the next time. Be well, stay wild as well.